good. Okay. So now we're going to look at an interesting man in Exodus chapter 18. That's where we are. And we're going to take a look. I first looked at this text. I thought, well, I can't get much out of this. I just don't see much here. But then as the more I looked at it, the more I studied it, I thought, this is an interesting man I'm dealing with here. We're going to take a look at Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, a man of wisdom and faith. And as you really start looking at Jethro, there's not a lot said about him in the Bible, but what is said is very admirable. Beginning in verse 1 of chapter 18, it says, Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife, Zipporah, after he had sent her away, and her two sons, of whom one was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And by the way, they were in Ethiopia. Midian is modern-day Ethiopia. So tensions are very, very good. Most scholars believe that they were Zipporah and Jethro and these in Midian, they were the black race. They were descendants of Ham. The other was named Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he was camped at the Mount of God. And he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her two sons with her. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and look at this, he bowed down and he kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare, and they went into the tent. There's a lot in those 7 verses. A lot about Jethro, and I think a little about Moses also. The first thing I want you to notice is how Moses had entrusted his family to his father-in-law. You see, Moses knew that there was going to be a lot of hardship, a lot of danger that they were going to be dealing with. He didn't know what to look for, what to expect. He knew God was called him. He knew God was leading him, but he didn't know exactly what God was leading him into. If he had, he may not have gone. But anyway, but he knew that with his wife and children along, it was going to be dangerous for them. So the safest place that he knew for them was with her father, his father-in-law. And then Moses, you'll see Jethro's name in the Bible. You'll also see the name Reuel. There is one more, but it's not used very often. And scholars disagree. There's really no way to know. Was that just another interpretation depending on the language of his first name, Jethro, and Reuel? Were they the same? Or was Reuel his last name? And there's no way of saying which one is correct, but we're just going to talk about Jethro tonight. Moses felt like that he could leave his family with his father-in-law. Now, what's this tell us? Well, obviously it should tell us. He knew that Jethro was a man that could be trusted. He knew that his family was safe as long as they were with Jethro. And he took his family and entrusted them into Jethro's care for quite a few years. So knowing that, when Jethro saw that it was time, that he felt like they got through the hardest part of the journey, and it was sort of winding down, and now was a good time to bring his family back to him, because he knew that Moses missed his family, being apart from him all those years. What a sacrifice. It's sort of like when a soldier takes a tour duty, and they sign up to serve their country. But they know many times especially during war, that if they sign up, they're not going to be at home. Now, they may be in the same country, they may be able to visit, but many times they'll be on the other side of the world. And back in the day, they didn't have Skype and all these other ways to communicate with their families. And it may be letters that took weeks or months to get there and back. And they knew that because of the vow that they had made to serve their country, that they were going to have to be separated from their family and give up their family for a period of time to serve their country. And this is pretty much what Moses had done. Moses had taken a wife, he had a family, he probably had a good life there in Midian with Jethro. From all things that we see, Jethro was probably fairly well off. He was a priest in Midian, respected, I'm sure. And yet, when he came to see Moses, the first thing that Moses did, he bowed down and he kissed him. That was in that day. That was the way you greeted people. You kissed on each cheek. And you still see that today if you're looking at TV and you see these people in these overseas, in these Arab countries, in these foreign countries, when they greet each other, they kiss on each cheek. And he greeted him, and then he asked him, how are you? How are you? What's going on in your life? How have things been? Tell me all about it. And then Jethro said, well, tell me what you've been doing, what God's done in your life. Basically, that's what he said. Tell me what God has done in your life. So that shows you something else about Jethro. So then we look at starting in verse 8. Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake. All the hardships that had befallen them on the journey, how the Lord had delivered them, and Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, from the hand of Pharaoh, who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know, underline this in your Bible, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it was proven when they dealt proudly against the people. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came with the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before God. Moses couldn't wait to tell his father-in-law what God had done for him. Have God ever done anything, just really done something really special in your life? Maybe it was a miracle healing, maybe he saved you from some disaster, maybe it was part of your family, something, but he did something really special in your life, and you couldn't wait to see somebody or get back to church to tell everybody what God had done in your life. When we have our praise services on the fifth Sundays, we look forward to coming and just say, well, let me tell you what God's been doing in my life. Let me tell you how God has worked in my life, and share our praises with one another. And this is Moses. He couldn't wait to tell his father-in-law what had been done in his life. Notice in verse 8, he gave all the glory to God. He told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh. Not about him. And by the way, it's never about us. It's all about him. Always. He couldn't wait to tell. And you know, I want to point out something to you here, and I can't say this for sure, but I just sort of read between the lines a little bit. Even though Jethro was a priest back in Midian, when he said, now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, I'm not absolutely sure that even though he was a priest and he was trying to do the right thing, I'm not absolutely sure that he was serving the true God, or him only. But it looks like here that maybe, according to verse 11, he may have been Moses' first convert to the true God. When he said, I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, it's proven when he dealt proudly against his people. Now, something you won't get from the scriptures here, but as I was doing research for this message, you know, I like to refer to Josephus a lot because he was a Jewish historian, and Josephus very knowledgeable, and he gives us a lot of in-depth. He'll take something maybe that Paul wrote a paragraph about and give us 4 pages on it, all the background. And he gave us a little something here about Jethro that's not, it's sort of mentioned here in the scriptures, but it's not really fleshed out, if you will. It said, and he took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came with the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses, his father-in-law. This is verse 12. Josephus said that Jethro led the worship. They had music, they had the meal, they had the worship, but it looks like that everyone respected his position as the priest, as the father-in-law of Moses, as a man of God, and he actually led the worship. Now you've got Moses here, you've got Aaron, you've got a lot of godly men but Jethro led the worship. I thought that was pretty telling about what kind of man we're talking about here. If you're truly a Christian and you really believe in God, you don't want just to listen to anybody lead the worship. You don't want to just listen to anybody preach. We got enough of that today on TV. You can get about any kind of preaching you want on TV. Well, it's pretty hard to get true preaching on TV. There's a few still out there. Charles Stanley's sermons are still out there. David Jeremiah, John MacArthur just went to be with the Lord, so he's up there now. But there's a lot of false preaching out there. But if you're a Christian, if you're trying to follow God, you want somebody that's going to tell you the truth. And by the way, we live in a world today, folks, it is so hard to know what's true. With Facebook, with artificial intelligence, we got fake news, we got fake people. They can make it look real, make them look like real people. You really, today, outside of this word right here, you really don't know what to believe or who to believe. Isn't it wonderful to know that we still have a word that we can believe no matter what it says? So he couldn't wait to tell him how God had delivered him. Jethro came in and led the worship. Now let's look at the rest of the verses. Beginning in verse 17. Moses, his father-in-law, said to him, the thing that you're doing is not good. Now what happened here? He's counseling Moses. And I want us to sort of focus on this a little bit. It's probably the best thing that could have happened to Moses once he started this journey that God brought Jethro here to give him counsel. Because without Jethro, Moses would have wore down and maybe given up. And I want to show you why. But Jethro had much wisdom. I said he was a man of wisdom and faith. And as we look at this, I want you to see where he counseled him. His father-in-law said to him, he noticed that he was out there settling every dispute. All the people were bringing all the problems to him. He said, the thing you're doing is not good. Now, he's not saying settling the disputes is not good. That's not what he's saying. You will surely wear out, both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Key words. Listen to me, I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You will be the people's representative before God, and you bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they're to walk, and the work that they're to do. That's what the preacher's called to do today. We can just tell you what it says. You have to decide if you're going to do it or not. Furthermore, now here's the key. You shall select out of all the people able men who fear God. Key, who fear God. Men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. Let them judge the people at all times. And let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure. If you don't, you won't be able to last. And these people also will go to their place in peace. Oh, there is a ton of good information and good wisdom right there. Years of wisdom spoke, and it probably saved Moses' life. Now notice something here in verse 14. He didn't interfere with him. He waited and took him aside. He said, when Moses' father-in-law saw all he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you're doing for the people? And he took him aside to talk to him. He didn't interrupt him while he was doing God's work. Now Moses understood that he was called to lead. He understood that much. But he also understood something else that needs to be understood in a lot of pulpits and a lot of churches. And you've seen this if you've been around church long enough. He was called to lead, not to rule. There's a difference. There's a difference between being a leader and ruling. People follow a leader. They're in subjection to a ruler. Jesus led. He was the shepherd. A shepherd doesn't push the sheep, he leads the sheep. So Moses understood that. But look at verse 18. Jethro understood that no one man could do it all. And I don't care who, whether it's a preacher or the president. No one person can do it all. I think one of the biggest mistakes that was made in the Bible was when the people told Samuel, we want a king. God had led them and won every battle they ever fought. Never lost a battle. And then they come to Samuel and said, we want a king like all the other nations. They could have said that we've already defeated. And God said, give them a king. Now, we don't have a king in America. They still have a few around the world. Mostly just for looks. They don't really do anything. But we have a president. Now, I don't care if it's George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, or whoever it is. Makes no difference. I've said this since I was a teenager. It's too big a job for one man. It's too big. The worst mistake we ever made is when we said, God, we don't need you to lead us anymore. We're going to get our own men to lead us, and we'll follow them. Look what it's done for us. Look what it's done for our world. One man can't handle it. But if that one man's wise, we're going to see here in just a second. Jethro tells him what to do. He said, teach them God's word. And it'll solve many of the problems on their own. In other words, if I can teach you as your pastor, if I can teach you what God's word says, and if you will heed it and go to it when you have a problem, then you'll be able to handle the problem just between you and God. You give it to him, you trust him. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, God will handle your problem. But he also points out something really, really important here. And he basically says here, that a leader's only good as his support. That's it. He said, you need to select, but notice I pointed out to you, he said, you need to select men who fear God. This is where we get our model for deacons in the church. And not elders, that's something different. Deacons in the church. The word deacons means to be a servant. It has been so corrupted that over the years, many, many churches are run by the deacons. They tell the preacher what to preach. They tell him what to do. If they don't like what he does, they get rid of the preacher and get one they can control. But by the way, those aren't churches. They're just meeting places. In God's church, the pastor is the leader. And if you've got a good, godly church, the deacons will be servants, and they're there for one thing, to support the pastor and to take the load off of his back. In big church, some people say, well, I don't really like a real big church because, it's just, so many people there, and there's nothing personal. Well, if it's done right, it is. I have a friend who had a big church. I think it had around, seems to me like it had around 30,000 membership. But if it's done right, look what he said here, how you divide them up. You divide them up by thousands, by hundreds, by fifties, and by tens, and that's how you do it. Even in the biggest churches, if it's done right, there should be about one deacon for every 10 families. And then when you get up to 100, then there's one who oversees these that they can come to him. And if it's bigger than that, he comes to the next one. If it's bigger than that, he comes to the next one. And then finally, if it's something none of them can handle, they bring it to the pastor, their leader, and he handles it. He takes it before God, who can handle anything. That's the way it's supposed to be done. And that's the way, by the way, it's done in real churches. If you get church, if you got deacons in your church that run things and take control of things, you don't have a church. That's not God's church. In God's church, the shepherd leads. The deacons are servants. I had a deacon tell me one time he was going to serve the Lord's Supper, and he whispered to me, You expect me to do this? And I whispered back to him, if you think you're too good to serve it, I'll be glad to. The church is just about dead today. This is where we get our model. This is how godly churches function. You have leaders of each group, thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. Now I said that Jethro was a wise man. So was Moses. How do I know that? He listened. A wise leader will listen to good advice. Folks, a leader is only as good as the people around him. No man is an island. You heard that? Well, it's true. And a good leader, a smart leader, will listen to those around him. Now, they're not making the decisions, but he'll get all the information he needs from them. And he will use their advice, and he will make the final decision, but he's then doing it on good advice because he's got advice from all the people he surrounded him with. I pray every day I pray for our president, whoever happens to be in office, President Trump right now, and I pray that God would surround him with godly advice. When you have ungodly advice and an ungodly president, you're going to have an ungodly country, and it's going to fail. Pray for your leaders, even if you don't like him. It's not a personality contest. You're not called to like him. I don't vote for president because I like him or don't like him. What will they do for my country that I love? But they need to be surrounded with godly people, godly counsel. And I'm not talking about some of the heretics that are up there right now advising, like Paula White and some of the others. I'm talking about good, godly people. Now, notice this. Even though he had all these other people helping him here, Moses still handled the biggest problems himself. And that's how it's supposed to be. But I want you to notice something else Moses did. Not only did it say Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he said. I said he's got wisdom. But he also, when he wrote, who wrote this book? Moses wrote this book. He wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. Now, Moses could have very easily have not given Jethro, just said, well, look, here's the idea I came up with, and I thought it worked real well. No. The Bible says, and everything I read about him, that Moses was a very humble individual. And he didn't hesitate to tell everyone from time their own whose idea this was to do it this way. Moses said, wasn't my idea. My father-in-law gave me this idea, and boy, it sure did work good. He gave credit where credit's due. So many people in church are more than willing to do something for the church as long as they get credit for it. Or they'll see something that's getting done and they'll step in to help and it's almost done so they can get credit for it. Instead of getting credit and when people praise you, why don't you look for what people are doing in the church behind the scenes and go to them privately and just praise them and thank them for what they're doing. Just a little friendly advice there. I mean, I've known some people since we started this church about 15 years ago. But I've seen people in this church that behind the scenes, nobody would have ever known what they did. But behind the scenes, I've seen a woman who was barely getting by, and her daughter actually wondered how she got by. But I've seen that woman seeing somebody in need, and as she shook their hand on the way out the door, slipped a $20 bill into it. Do you think she didn't need that $20 bill? Absolutely. Do you think she was doing God's bidding? Absolutely. We've had things bought for this church. Nobody knew who bought them, but they showed up. And the people that supplied them, they didn't stand up and say, hey, look what I did. I bought that. I gave that for the church. There's a lot of churches today, people put in stained glass windows as long as they get their name on them. They'll put in new pews as long as they got their name on the other pew. If you're doing it for that reason, that's why you're doing it, you might as well save your money, because you just got your reward. Jesus himself said, you got your reward. But Moses was wise. He listened. He gave credit to good old Jethro. There's so much that we can take away from this text before us, both for our churches and for our government. There's so much here because our government is run on the same basis as our churches here is, the outline that Jethro gave us. Oh, by the way, do you think that was really Jethro's idea? Do you think that really came from him? Or maybe, just maybe God put that thought in his mind that this is the way it needs to be done? Yeah, I think so. See, what we learn from this is a few things. Number one, under no circumstances should all the power be in one person's hands. I don't care who he is. Don't care how much you like him. Don't care how much good you think he's doing, whether it's in government or in church. Makes no difference. Absolute power will give you absolute authority, and absolute authority will give you an absolute problem. And sooner you won't have a leader anymore, you'll have a ruler. So under no circumstances, Moses learned that he was a better leader and can do a whole lot more by doing it the way Jethro tells him to do it here. He said, that makes perfectly good sense. It takes so much off of me. You know, and pastors, I'll tell you, many pastors, they spend so much time dealing with little petty things that don't mean anything. People just want to complain about the music. They complain about the sermon's too long, the sermon's too short. I don't like the music. I don't like the color of the carpet. We need to, church is split over the color of the carpet. Well, so-and-so looked at me wrong. So-and-so's doing so-and-so. And they take it all and throw it on the pastor. You're supposed to settle it. You fix it. Folks, it'll wear you out. There are some churches, they believe every time somebody's in the hospital, if the pastor's not there the first day they're in the hospital, he's not doing his job, quote unquote. May I remind you again, that's what the deacons are for. That's what the deacons are for. The deacons are to go and to visit these people. They're servants, remember? And if someone's seriously ill, yes, and they may not have surgery and may not get through this, that's when the pastor, he'll go and he'll spend time with them and he'll deal with them. But when somebody's got a hangnail and they had to get it treated, and I knew a woman like this one time, and man, if the pastor didn't show up the first day, she was all over him. Boy, he is not much of a preacher. He'd have been here to visit me. Maybe he was out visiting somebody that was really sick and hurt. Another thing we see here, any leader that thinks they know it all, they don't know anything. Anybody you meet that thinks they know it all, they don't know anything. Anybody you meet that thinks they know everything about this Bible, they know nothing about this Bible. The more you learn about this Bible, the more you know, the more you're going to want to learn, the more you're going to understand you don't know. I've said, I don't know how many, probably hundreds of times that I've read this Bible through. reading it through three times this year, 3 different books. And every time I go through it, I find something new. Did they put something in there I hadn't? No. It's just wherever you are in life, that's what it speaks to you. But you can't live something you don't know, and the only way you can know it is to read it. And if you think you got it all, I've had a person tell me one time they thought they knew more than the preacher did in their church. By the way, they fell away from the Lord a few years after that and probably died lost. Moses was a great leader, but he was a great leader because he was willing not only to listen to God, but he was also willing to listen to Jethro. He was willing to listen to godly counsel, the godly men that God put in his life. Now, God knows your heart. If God knows you're not going to listen, I don't know if he'll even put anybody in your life. That would just condemn you more. But if God knows a person's wise and he knows that they'll listen to godly counsel, he'll put godly people around them. And by the way, pastors can learn from their congregation. God speaks to you just like he speaks to us. And when God puts something on your heart, somebody can come to, well, the Lord showed me this. Charles Stanley, I was reading a book of his recently, and he talked about how he was dealing with an issue, and he was telling his son Andy about it. He said, I just realized this was in my life, and I didn't know it. Andy said, Lord showed me that a week ago. I've been praying that he would show you. You want to help somebody? Get on your knees and take them to the Lord in prayer. And then God, if he wants to use you, let you be the instrument. He'll give you what you need. Maybe you can be the one to give the godly counsel that they need. But Moses showed us how wise he was. I think we can all learn a valuable lesson from this text. Look how Jethro handled it. Look how Moses handled it. Look how God used Jethro to be an influence to Moses, and then how he used Moses and surrounded him with good godly men, remember, who fear God. He surrounded him. Now, he didn't just go and pick out somebody on a popularity basis like they do deacons a lot of times. Well, we like him. He's a big giver. We make him a deacon. I've had people get mad at me for not making certain people deacon, and I may have thought the world of the person personally, but qualifications for deacon. God, let him use you. Surround yourself with godly people and listen to godly advice. Don't ask advice from non-Christians because you're going to get ungodly advice. So much to learn here. So much to learn. And if we'll open our heart and let God teach us, I think we can all live a better life.